I woke up to the sound of rain tapping against the window and the hum of the old fridge from the kitchen. It was my 65th birthday. There was no phone call, no knock at the door, just the quiet of the house and a single envelope on the counter, a card from the local church addressed in blocky handwriting by one of the volunteers. I set it down next to a worn picture frame. It held a photo of Jason, no older than 10, smiling wide, one front tooth, missing his arms thrown around my shoulders like I was his whole world. I used to love birthdays. We shared one, Jason and I, June 12th. Every year we'd blow out candles on the same cake, laughing over how the universe had tied us together. He was a sweet kid, thoughtful. He'd make me those lopsided cards with crayon hearts, and once he spent his allowance on a plastic bracelet he thought looked fancy. I still have it tucked in a drawer somewhere. The shift between us didn't happen all at once. It came in layers like fog rolling in before a storm. He was in his 30s when he called to tell me about a healthcare startup his friend was launching. He was excited, talking fast, full of dreams. Said he needed $7 to get in on the ground floor. I listened. I asked questions. Something about it didn't feel right. There were no financials, no clarity, just promises. I told him I couldn't do it, that it sounded risky. I remember the silence on the other end, heavy and cold. Then his voice, sharp, angry, asking why I never believed in him. He hung up. I thought we'd talk again after he cooled off. But he never called back. And he didn't return my messages. That was 15 years ago. The house is smaller now. I moved here after retiring. It's enough for me. I cook simple meals, tend my plants, volunteer at the shelter on Sundays. But there are days like this one where silence wraps around everything like a second skin. I thought maybe time would soften him. That maybe as he got older, he'd remember who I was, who we were. I ran my fingers along the edge of the picture frame and set it back down. Then I made myself tea and sat by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass like quiet tears no one could see. I hadn't seen Jason in 15 years, but I still remembered the way he used to lean his head against my shoulder when he was tired. On the morning of our shared birthday, I packed a tin of homemade cookies and filled the gas tank. I told myself it wasn't a big gesture. Just a drive. Just a visit. 4 hours from Eugene to Seattle. I didn't expect anything. But deep down, I think I was hoping for something small. A moment. A crack in the wall between us. The closer I got, the more my chest tightened. The sky was overcast and traffic was light. I kept going over what I might say, how I'd keep it simple. Just wanted to see your face. Just wanted to say happy birthday. Maybe he'd listen. Maybe seeing me there, something would soften. A memory. A flicker. I parked a block away from his house. It was a neat 2-story in a quiet neighborhood. Fresh paint. A well-kept lawn. Balloons were tied to the mailbox, bobbing gently in the breeze. A banner stretched across the porch. Happy birthday, Jason. The windows glowed warm, and through the curtains I saw silhouettes moving inside. Laughter floated out. Dishes clinking. Someone put on music. I stood at the edge of the walkway for a moment, just listening. My hands were shaking. I walked up the steps and rang the doorbell. My heart thudded in my ears. The door opened a few seconds later, and there he was. Jason. Older now, but still unmistakably my boy. His face froze when he saw me. I tried to smile, but the words stuck. I held out the tin. Said happy birthday, our birthday. He didn't take it. He stepped halfway out the door, blocking the view behind him. His voice was flat. Asked what I was doing there. I said I just wanted to see him. Just wanted to see my grandson. Then over his shoulder, a boy walked past the hallway. Tall, slim, with Jason's eyes. He glanced at me but didn't stop. I don't know if he even knew who I was. Jason didn't move. He said it wasn't a good time, that I should have called, that I wasn't welcome here. He didn't raise his voice. That somehow made it worse. I asked to speak to Elliot. Just 5 minutes. Please. He looked past me like he wanted this over. Said no. Then he shut the door. I stood there holding the tin of cookies, hearing the muffled sound of celebration from inside. The door didn't open again. I made it to the car before the tears started. I sat in the front seat with both hands on the wheel, staring through the windshield. It was still raining. I drove in silence all the way home. The highway blurred around me. I didn't even stop for gas until the warning light came on. That night, I left the cookies on the counter untouched. The sound of their laughter stayed with me long after the house went quiet. It started with a glance across the reading room. I was at the Eugene Public Library on a rainy Thursday leafing through a book I wasn't really reading. I came here often mostly for the quiet. The quiet felt different from home, less hollow. That day, a woman in her 70s sat 2 chairs down from me, flipping pages of a legal memoir like she wasn't really seeing the words either. Her name was Eleanor. We struck up a conversation about the book then, about Oregon winters, and then about nothing in particular. She was sharp, elegant in that old-school, no-nonsense way. A retired attorney. Widowed. No kids. But something about her eyes told me she noticed things. The kind of woman who heard what you didn't say out loud. It only took 2 visits before she asked the question. Not directly, not rudely. Just one of those moments when she looked at me and said, "I can tell something's sitting heavy on you." And suddenly I was talking. About Jason. About the fight. About the silence that followed. I didn't cry, not then, but my voice cracked in places. She didn't flinch. She just listened. She waited until I was done before saying anything. Then she asked if I'd ever tried writing to him. Not to fix things, she said, just to clear your side of the street. Write it raw. Honest. No defenses. No explaining. Just the truth and a simple, "I'm sorry." I laughed softly, told her he probably wouldn't even open it. She said that didn't matter. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the same one Jason used to color on when he was small, and I pulled out a yellow legal pad. I didn't have fancy stationery. I wrote in pen, slow and careful. The words came like pulling splinters. I didn't stop until the last sentence, which was just 3 words. I miss you. 3 weeks passed before I saw the envelope again. It was stuffed into my mailbox, the edges crumpled like someone had crushed it in their hand before dropping it in. My name was still there, written in my own handwriting. But the seal had been sliced open, and inside the letter I had written was torn into jagged pieces. Folded between them was a yellow sticky note. 5 words written in thick black ink. Stop trying to be part of our lives. I didn't cry. Not right away. I stood in the kitchen with the torn paper in one hand and the sticky note in the other. It felt like I'd been shoved underwater. No sound. Just the thudding in my chest. I sat down at the table where I had written that letter and looked out the window, not really seeing anything. Then I folded everything back up and walked to the closet in the hallway. There was a cardboard box on the top shelf. Inside were 15 years of unopened birthday cards, holiday gifts, and little books I'd bought for Elliot whenever I saw something I thought he'd like. Wrapped in tissue. Still new. Still waiting. I placed the envelope on top, closed the lid, and put the box back. My hand shook a little as I shut the closet door. The house was quiet. I poured myself a glass of water but didn't drink it. That night, I went to bed without brushing my teeth. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy in a way I didn't have words for. It wasn't just rejection, it was finality. Like something I had kept alive by hope had finally stopped breathing. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I stopped to fill up my tank. The woman behind the counter looked tired, like she'd been on her feet too long, but still smiled when I paid in cash. On impulse, I asked for a Powerball ticket. I'd never bought one before. Didn't believe in luck. But I figured, why not? It was only $2. I folded the slip and tucked it in my wallet. By the time the numbers were drawn that Friday night, I'd almost forgotten about it. I was sitting on the couch with a blanket over my lap, eating canned chicken noodle soup. The TV was on in the background. I looked up when they started calling out the winning numbers. I pulled out the ticket more out of boredom than belief. The first number matched. Then the second. My stomach tightened. I checked again. Then the third. I blinked, looked away, and looked back. All of them. Every single one. My fingers went cold, the spoon still halfway to my mouth. I didn't scream. Didn't jump. I just sat there staring at the screen, then at the ticket, then back at the screen. I read the numbers aloud, slow and quiet, like I was trying to talk myself down from a dream. I set the bowl on the coffee table and stood up, feeling like the floor was shifting under my feet. I walked into the kitchen, then back into the living room, then sat down again. My chest felt hollow and full at the same time. I thought of Jason. I thought of Elliot. I thought of that box in the hallway closet. The next morning, I called Eleanor. She was the only person I trusted not to lose her head. We sat across from each other at the library, speaking low. She connected me with someone discreet, a financial attorney in Portland. I claimed the winnings through a blind trust. No press, no photo, no announcement. No one knew. I didn't move. I didn't buy a new car. I kept my old Honda and my one-bedroom apartment. I still went to the shelter on Sundays. But something inside me had shifted. It wasn't joy. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. I had been powerless for a long time. Now I wasn't. That didn't mean I would act out of spite. But it meant I could choose who I let in. And it meant I could protect the one person I hadn't given up on. I started thinking about Elliot, about what kind of life he might have if someone looked out for him. Really looked out. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't as alone as I used to be. The email came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I had just returned from the grocery store and was sorting through receipts when my phone buzzed. The subject line said, "Hi, Mom." My hands froze. I hadn't seen his name in my inbox in 15 years. My first instinct was to close the app. Instead, I opened it and read every word. He kept the tone warm, said he'd been thinking about me, asked how I was doing, said he missed me. No mention of what happened. No apology. Just a sudden wave of concern out of nowhere. I sat very still, rereading it twice. It didn't feel real. It felt like bait. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I called Eleanor. She was quiet as I read her the message. Then she said to be careful. That same week, I heard through a contact at the shelter that Jason's company was under federal review. Something about aggressive sales tactics and undisclosed financial backers. I looked it up. He was being sued. Deep in debt. I didn't need confirmation after that. I wrote back 2 days later, short and sweet. I said I was doing well and that it was nice to hear from him. I asked how Elliot was. I kept my tone light. No mention of money. No hint that I knew anything at all. But inside, I felt the lines being drawn. This wasn't a reunion. This was strategy. I didn't feel hurt this time. I felt steady. He thought I was still the same woman he left behind. And maybe I was. But I was also someone else now. Someone who had nothing to lose. And more power than he could imagine. The restaurant was glass and steel and quiet conversation. The kind of place where they folded the napkins into sharp corners and poured sparkling water without asking. I arrived 5 minutes early, sat at the table Jason had reserved, and waited with my hands folded in my lap. I watched the door. My heart was steady, but my stomach had that empty stretch that comes when something matters more than you admit. They walked in together. Jason in a navy blazer, his wife Tina in cream with perfect posture. Elliot followed, tall and lean hair, swept back the way boys wear it now. He looked around the room like he didn't want to be there. When they reached the table, Jason leaned in like this was normal. Like it hadn't been 15 years since he last looked me in the eye. Elliot's voice was the first I heard. He nodded at me, cool and polite. "Good to meet you, Mrs. Carter." I smiled, but felt something snap in my chest. He didn't know me. Or he'd been told not to. Tina gave me a rehearsed smile and sat down across from me. Jason asked about the drive, the weather, Oregon. He was careful not to bring up anything real. I answered softly. Watched Elliot poke at the edge of the tablecloth like he wanted to be anywhere else. He didn't say much, but when I mentioned volunteering at the shelter, he looked up. Asked what kind of dogs we had. It lasted only a moment before Jason interrupted with a joke about my memory. Said something like we worry about her wandering off sometimes, but she still remembers the old street names. Tina laughed. Elliot didn't. The waiter came. Jason ordered for the table without asking. I took slow sips of my soup, watching Elliot from the corner of my eye. He didn't touch his steak. At one point, he looked down at his phone, typed something quickly, then glanced at Jason. His face didn't change, but I could feel a current in the air. Like something unspoken was shifting. When the meal ended and Jason pulled out his card to pay, Elliot leaned in just slightly. He reached toward my phone on the table, tapped something, then pushed it closer to me. His hand brushed mine, and he didn't look up. Just said one thing under his breath. "Can we talk sometimes?" I didn't react. Not right then. I nodded once and said nothing. They left soon after. Jason gave me a quick hug that felt like a handshake. Tina smiled tightly. Elliot didn't say goodbye. I sat in the restaurant for a while after they left. Let the waiter clear the plates. I picked up my phone and saw a new number in my contacts. No name. Just a message that said, "Thanks for lunch." My hands were shaking, but I smiled. For the first time in a long while, something inside me reached for the light. It was just after 10 when the message came. I was folding laundry, something mindless to fill the quiet, when my phone buzzed once on the kitchen counter. The screen lit up with a number I now knew by heart. Elliot's message was short. Just a few sentences. He said his parents were talking about moving to Vancouver. Something about starting over. He didn't think it was just about leaving the country. He thought it had to do with me. And the money. I stared at the screen for a long time. My breath came in shallow pulls. The pieces started clicking together. The sudden friendliness. The lunch invitation. The careful conversations that went nowhere. I texted Elliot back. Told him to sit tight. Not to say anything to anyone. I would handle it. The next morning, I called a private investigator. He came recommended by Eleanor, who had once used him in a probate case. quiet man. Sharp. No nonsense. I gave him what little I had. Jason's company name. The timing. A few financial details I'd found buried in the articles I'd been quietly collecting. He called back 4 days later with the full picture. Jason's startup was a shell. No real operations. No product. Just a front. It was heavily leveraged with money from private investors, some of whom were starting to ask questions. A federal audit was underway. His assets were frozen. He and Tina were planning to move funds through a new company registered under Tina's maiden name. They had created a pitch deck, a polished fake business plan. He found one slide that referenced a legacy investor. That meant me. I thanked him, hung up the phone, and sat still at the kitchen table for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. But something inside me settled, cold and steady. I would not let them rob me of my peace. And I would not let them drag Elliot down with them. That evening, I sent Jason an email. I said I'd been thinking about our last lunch, that I had come into a little extra money through a real estate sale. I said I might be open to investing in his new venture. I asked if they'd come down for the weekend to discuss the details. Told them I'd cook. Keep it casual. He replied within the hour. Said they'd love to. Thanked me for the chance. Said he was excited to share what they'd been working on. I closed my laptop and looked out the window. The porch light glowed against the dark. I could hear the wind moving through the trees. This time, I wasn't afraid of the silence. This time, I was ready for what came next. They arrived just after noon. Jason had on a blazer again. Tina wore pearls and Elliot hung back, hands in his pockets, eyes flicking toward the ground. I opened the door with a soft smile and welcomed them in like any other visit. The table was already set. Roast chicken, green beans, cornbread. I poured lemonade. Small talk passed like paper thin and nervous. Jason launched into his pitch before dessert. He had a laptop, some charts. A lot of buzzwords. Tina nodded along, adding her part about Canadian markets and opportunity. I let them talk. I nodded when it made sense to. Smiled when I needed to. Elliot barely touched his plate. When they were finished, I stood up and cleared my throat. I told them I appreciated their time. Then I looked at Jason and said his company didn't exist. I said I knew about the debt, the lawsuits, the plan to funnel money through a fake firm and disappear into British Columbia. I turned to Tina and said I knew about the shell accounts in her name, about the way they had rehearsed this meeting like it was a performance. Jason's face went pale. Tina's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I stayed calm. I didn't raise my voice. I told them I had no interest in punishing them. But I had no interest in being fooled again either. I told them I was willing to help. I would pay off the debt. I would set up a college fund for Elliot, but only under conditions. They would not leave the country. They would begin therapy. And Elliot would spend weekends with me. Jason started to speak, his voice rising, something about manipulation and guilt. But Elliot stood up before he could finish. He looked at his father, then at me. His hands shook slightly, but his voice was steady. He said he wanted to stay, that he wanted Grandma in his life. The room went silent. Tina blinked fast, like she was trying not to cry. Jason sat down hard, staring at the table like it had betrayed him too. I walked over to Elliot and put my hand on his shoulder. He didn't flinch. For the first time, I saw a boy who had made his own choice. That was the moment everything changed. Not because I had won, but because someone had chosen to stand beside me, not out of duty, but out of love. The sun was soft that afternoon, slanting through the trees and warming the wooden fence. I turned 67 with lemonade in my hand and Elliot's laughter spilling across the backyard. The table was simple. Grilled chicken, Tina's potato salad, a chocolate cake Jason picked up from the bakery downtown. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Jason helped string up the lights the night before. Tina brought folding chairs. Elliot came early and helped me slice watermelon. He was taller now, quieter in his movements but more present. We talked about his classes. He teased me about my garden gnomes. I let him win at cards just this once. After we ate, Elliot handed me a wrapped package. It was a photo album. Each page had a snapshot of our weekends. Walking the dog, making pancakes, visiting the science museum. His handwriting was scribbled beside each one. A date, a small note. The last page had no photo, just a sentence in blue ink. Family. Imperfect but ours. I closed the book and felt the breath catch in my chest. No one said anything. The breeze moved the edge of the tablecloth, and a bird chirped somewhere behind the fence. I blinked fast and smiled through the blur. My hands were steady. My heart was full. That night, after everyone left, I sat out under the patio light and looked through the album again. The quiet didn't hurt anymore. It held space instead of emptiness. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for something to change. I was just there, whole and at peace.